You guys have to get a load of this. There's this guy who released a monologue online named Stefan Molyneux, if I've got his last name right. And his video was called The Case Against Communism. From Hong Kong, Fight for Freedom. It has to be one of the biggest pieces of horse manure I've seen for most of this year. And I've been covering the Hong Kong protests, so that's saying a lot. I think, though, a lot of people are going to take what he says seriously because although he's completely full of he's articulate, which almost makes it feel authentic. First of all, let's clear up the title. I think what he's actually trying to say is the case against the Communist Party. But whatever, this is the least of the issues with his video. Initially, I thought he was trying to do some sort of a William Shatner meets Patrick Stewart stage show of some sort. Let me show you the first clip so you can start to get a feel for this guy. And I'll, of course, leave the link for his full talk in the description below.
The question before the court of public opinion today is what is the validity of the handover of Hong Kong to China in 2047.
All right, so that is what this topic is about, the handover to China in 2047. Let's ignore for a second Hong Kong has already been handed over to China in 1997 and it's already a part of China under the one country, two systems policy. But whatever, let's continue with this genius of sorts.
The communists who took over China in the late 1940s had a particular relationship to contract law. And that relationship to contract law is that it could be shredded.
Okay. You've got my interest now because I'm always interested in hearing about how China has violated the joint Sino-British contract/agreement without anybody ever really being able to tell me exactly what they think they violated. Finally, I'm not only going to be told, but I'm going to be told in a Shakespearean stage performance format. It doesn't get much better than this.
When it comes to world-class hypocrisy for the Chinese Communist Party to suddenly say, but you see, we must respect contracts, when the entire foundation of their power was on the tearing up of contracts.
Oh, that's what we're doing here. We're actually saying they've been honoring the contract all along, but the people of Hong Kong shouldn't, in return, honor it, because there were times that the Communist Party didn't follow their contracts with other people before. So why can't we all just be like the Communist Party? This is ridiculous, but you know what? It's exactly what I'd expect to hear from a guy who supports the Hong Kong protesters. The protesters who beat the crap out of people who disagree with them in the name of free speech. And the guys who act as brutal as they say their so-called oppressors are. And this dude still has the nerve to talk about hypocrisy or even mention that word in this video. Let's continue.
If you sign a contract to lease a car for $500 a month, the car company cannot say, oh, no, we're changing that to $2,000 a month. There is a reasonable expectation of the continuance of the services for which you contract. If those services change, the contract is null and void.
This is a really odd one. He's just kind of saying random stuff without quantifying it. He's saying if the services change in a contract, the contract becomes null and void. But he's not really doing anything to prove that any services have changed. So he keeps blathering on from here about how contract law works between people and corporations. Then he says this.
The British did not make a contract with geography. The British did not dig up a pile of dirt and negotiate with that. The British made a contract with a dynasty, the Qing dynasty. When an individual dies, his contracts are voided. When a corporation signs a contract, if that corporation goes defunct, the contract is also null and void.
Okay, ignoring for a fact that this isn't a corporation that's gone defunct, so to speak, and when a new company takes over for an old company, if he really wants to liken these governments to companies, no, your contract is not null and void. If you want to get back to making the argument on products and services changing, what were those products and services, and how did they change? Especially since when he was talking about that, he was talking about the initial contract when the British took over Hong Kong. How the heck are you going to be able to come up with anything to quantify this statement that the Qing dynasty were supposed to be providing some sort of products and services that they failed to then provide after the Communist Party took over?
What happens when a government itself dies? Well, the communists have already answered that question for us. In fact, when they murder a government, they void and destroy all of its contracts, as we see with land reform.
Does he actually realize what he's saying here? He says when the mainland government changed, they tore up old contracts and took land back. I'm assuming he's talking about the things that happened in the mainland. So on the basis of the fact that he wants to play by the mainland's rules, when the mainland Chinese government changed, they should have just tore up the agreement with the British and taken Hong Kong back. But no, they didn't do that. They respected the contract, and he's still trying to make this look like a bad thing. Look at this next clip to see how hard he's trying to drive home this point that this is a very bad thing.
And yet, like a immortal vampire, like a superhero, immune to the bullets of time, morality, reason, and evidence, the contract has maintained itself. It lives. It continues. It cannot be killed.
Okay, that was pretty good. That was dramatic, but I'm not going to comment on that one anymore. That kind of reinforces my last comment. But getting back to the argument of products or services changing since the handover agreement, at least for this portion. This next clip is the closest he comes to a coherent answer about this. Let's have a listen.
When the British signed the contract, what was their expectation? That the freedoms would continue.
That the freedoms should continue, eh? Well, of course he doesn't quantify this either, but you know why? Because he can't. The first day that Hong Kong had freedom of speech and freedom of assembly laws was the day of handover, when Basic Law went into effect. Under the British, all news had to be approved by a central authority before being published. In the 22 years since the handover, Hong Kong has voted more times for their legislative council and district council members than they did in the entire 156 years of British rule. If you thought this ignorance was astounding, wait until you hear what he says next.
You will also note that it is somehow considered unjust that the British took over Hong Kong. Why? Why is that unjust? Why is the right of conquest accorded to every single race, color, and creed except the whites?
You have to be kidding me here, please. Please tell me this is some sort of a ridiculous parody. Please tell me that little laugh at the beginning of this indicates how ridiculous he knows that statement was. I mean, let's ignore how Hong Kong was taken over by the British to begin with for a moment. Are you seriously trying to tell me that historically white people have been excluded from being able to go on conquests? Okay, let's move on.
Hong Kong was not initially part of China. Hong Kong was taken over a few centuries BC by China.
Okay, so, oh my God, he laughed at the beginning of this one too, so I'm really hoping this is just a joke. A few centuries BC, is that not long enough ago? Does he realize the implications of what he's saying, that this isn't long enough ago, as a Canadian who grew up on lands that belonged to somebody else? Basically yesterday in comparison to this. This is, of course, ignoring that the original settlers didn't have a nation in Hong Kong. They simply had walled villages made up of predominantly Chinese Hakka settlers. Should the Cantonese be giving these lands back to them then? But wait, hold on a second. What happened to conquests being okay? And this is centuries ago, right? Can this dude even keep a straight thought for just 5 minutes?
You see, but that made it part of China. Why? Because the land touches? That's crazy.
Oh, okay, so wait, hold on here a second. So a made-up conquest into Hong Kong by China centuries ago, because it was on land that touches their land, is crazy. But a conquest from white people halfway across the globe is A-okay? Jesus Christ.
That transfer from China to the British Empire made people in Hong Kong far more free. It was to the benefit of Hong Kongers.
Okay, so he's almost making a half-decent point here. Hong Kong is far more free now than it ever probably would have been without this British takeover. But to try and pretend that local Hong Kong people were free under the British during their rule is downright insulting. I'll get back to this point in a little bit, but notice how he wants to talk about a supposed transition to a more free society when the British took over, but he's ignoring how much more free Hong Kong became after 1997.
Which is why there were no riots. Why the appalling scenes that we saw last night? Tear gas.
Okay, we've gone right back to Looney Tunes again. No riots, no tear gas. I'll let you go off and take a look at the 1967 riots on your own, and let me know how much more you love modern-day Hong Kong police after you're back.
In every country save America, slavery was ended with the stroke of a pen. Only America had a civil war, well, arguably related to slavery. All other countries ended slavery simply by disallowing the government to continue the enforcement of slave contracts. You see, those contracts were torn up. Those contracts were destroyed, and humanity, significant portions, swaths of humanity breathed free air for the first time in their existence.
How in the heck are you going to bring slavery into a conversation where you're trying to convince everyone that the British freed Hong Kong and everyone was more free, when even 80 years into British rule, most of Hong Kong had purchased domestic female slaves at a young age who could only be freed through marriage? You can take a look at A Concise History of Hong Kong by John Mark Carroll, I believe it is, for more information on that. But perhaps more interesting on that is, on paper, the British had anti-slavery laws. What was that you said about not following contracts again?
One aspect of that contract has already been torn up. The British were supposed to hold Hong Kong Island in perpetuity. Already been torn up.
Really? You're going to talk about contract law for half of your video, and you're going to rebrand the contract renegotiation as the Chinese tearing up the contract? This dude is trying to justify one side tearing up an existing contract here, which he's basically advocating for, based on evidence that contracts have been mutually renegotiated in the past. There's plenty of documents online about the 22 official meetings they had about this, including leaked documents from the British, and you can go check that out yourself.
No, we must fulfill the contract, say the communists. This contract that has stretched for so long must be honored, must be fulfilled. Nobody can take the claims of a communist to respect long-term contracts seriously.
Okay, you know what, I'm gonna end it on this one. So basically he's saying the Communist Party shouldn't be taken seriously, even though they have never violated the contract we're talking about here. But he should be taken seriously, even though he's suggesting to do something that he's criticizing the Communist Party for doing. His logic is as scary as the Hong Kong protesters' logic, and it's no wonder he's on their side. You guys can check out his full video if you want in the link in the description below, but it's really hard to sit through. It starts off kind of funny and it just slowly becomes insulting. I hope you guys really appreciate what I've done for you here. I've really taken one for the team sitting through that crap, and you can show me your love by hitting the subscribe button. And I'll finish off by saying that his YouTube channel says that he is the world's largest and most popular philosophy show. And to that I say, God help us all. I'll see you next time.